Good morning, everyone. I haven't locked Kitty up yet, so we're going to see how this works. He's, of course, going to come right over here as soon as I start talking. He's down at my feet looking at me, trying to decide, should I do this again? I'm constantly reminded of his disobedience. I don't have this upper light on. That I guess we're probably the same with God. So he's over here now. He wants me to pet him, but then he starts biting. And I don't pet him, and he's clawing, and he's biting. And there he goes. Say hi, kitty. There we go. Anyhow, as I start off with such high hopes that he will make it through my recording without attacking me. Again, I think, he does what he does out of instinct. It's his nature to be that way. And we are that way with God as well. So I can understand to a degree what we do. God is eternally gracious, though. He can deal with it. I am not. I am human. And I can't. Okay, so as I'm recording this is the Jewish Sabbath. It's Saturday. The Jews use the last day of the week to celebrate. We use the first day of the week on Sunday as Christians. Just to keep them separate. We got to keep our belief systems divided. We can't ever get together and compare notes and find out that we're basically doing the same thing. Okay. So we're going to talk about the Passover Seder, as it's called. We know what the Passover is, and they were told, and we read about it previously, that they were told to celebrate the Passover for generations to come. Continue to celebrate it, because it's a reminder of what God will do to help set his people free. Now, we were set free not to behave the same as normal. We were set free to worship God and to follow God. And Israel's just, it's up and down, up and down. First they follow him, then they don't, then they follow him, then they don't. And you can look at their history, and they prospered when they followed him, and they failed when they didn't. You'd think they'd learn, but you'd think we'd learn. You'd think Kitty would learn. No, it's nature. Okay, as we talk about this, I want to point out that they didn't practice this Passover Seder during the time of Jesus. They went to the temple. They went into Jerusalem. It's one of the pilgrimage times, and Jesus did that. But they didn't, because they had a temple and they had a city that they could go to, they didn't practice this as they do today. They had to recreate a lot of this stuff in modern times because they had nowhere to do it any other way. So he didn't celebrate it. But the Last Supper would have been the Passover meal. And I'm giving you this as historic information. I'm not saying that as Christians we need to follow the Jewish law, follow anything that's in the Bible in the Old Testament. The new covenant that we got at the Last Supper from Jesus, that's what we're supposed to honor and follow as best we can. But it's interesting to note that this is what they do, and we're just going to study it. It's fun. I love learning about history. So we're not under any obligation. And some of the Jews have, there's a mixed feeling on whether or not Christians should even do the Seder. Because you can go through the rituals. Seder basically means order, so there's an order of things that has to be done. I'm not going to recreate it for you. There are videos out there that have done that. But this is what we're going to look at. Now, the Seder meal we're going to skip ahead in some of the order. This isn't the first thing, but a Seder meal is going to be one that reminds them of what the Jews at the time would have celebrated, or the children of Abraham. Jews basically mean Judah. He wasn't there initially. So we're going to see that there's this typical Seder plate. It's going to have matzah, which is a kosher flatbread, no leaven, bitter herbs, because they had basically, and they have to eat, they had to eat standing up, because they had to be dressed fully ready to go, because they were going to leave when God said leave, and they were going to get out of there quickly, because Pharaoh, as we see later on if we read the whole story, lets him go and then changes his mind. They had traditional dishes like matzo ball soup, gefilte fish, brisket, and potato krugel, potato pancake. So it's good food, it tastes good. It's not always the ideal meal. Again, is to remind them of the haste in preparation. That's why there's no leaven. You didn't have time to let things rise. And leaven represents sin in the Bible. It's figurative. So it's not saying we shouldn't eat leavened bread. I'm having croissants this morning. You can eat it, just remember what it's for. Now, for the matzah, they're going to have 3 pieces of unleavened bread, symbolizing the hasty departure of the Israelites from Egypt. Bitter herbs, horseradish or romaine lettuce, represent the bitterness of slavery. Cherosette would be another food dish that they would have. It's a mixture of chopped apples and nuts and a little bit of wine, symbolizing the mortar used by the Israelites to build the Egyptian cities. Now, we're not completely sure that the pyramids were built by the Israelites, but we know that they were slaves at the end, and they did make brick out of the mud. So we have that in the Bible. Karpas, also a green vegetable, like parsley dipped in water, representing the tears of the Israelites. Everything's symbolic in this. Zerah, roasted shank bone. They ate good food, but they didn't eat, it's got a bone in it. Reminds people of the Passover lamb sacrificed in the temple. They might have a pizza, which is a roasted egg, represents the sacrifice in the temple and the cycle of life. So again, the traditional meals could be the matzo ball soup, which is with matzo balls, traditional kind of Ashkenazi Jewish dish. I haven't finished my coffee yet. My mouth isn't working. I had to get up an hour early to let somebody out who didn't do their planning right. Gefilte fish is just a post fish dumpling, another Ashkenazi staple. Brisket's a slow cook, flavorful cut of meat. If you've never had it, it's pretty good. And that's often served as the main course. Potato krugel is like a baked potato casserole. You can also do it like take the mashed potatoes and fry them up. I like that part the best. You can have, now this is the word that I don't recognize. Tzimmes, T-Z-I-M-M-E-S. I got this off of a Jewish site. A stew of carrots and prunes, sometimes including potatoes or sweet potatoes. Never had that. They could also have roast chicken. Is another option. Depends on the household, what you like to eat, what you don't. And there'd be a dessert, like a flourless chocolate cake. Common Passover dessert. Coconut macaroons could also be served. And a matzo truffle tart or matzo crumble, other dessert options. Again, it's all flatbed stuff. Okay, so we have the Haggadah. Seder follows a specific order outlined in a book called the Haggadah, which guides the retelling of the Exodus story. They're going to go over this. This is a tradition so that everybody understands it. Storytelling was the only way that people learned about what was going on in the early phases of the Bible. People couldn't afford books. A book had to be handwritten by a professional scribe whose job was to, letter by letter, dot and tittle, to get it right. They were expensive. Only rich people had them. The average person didn't, because they were written on, if they were written on parchment, they frankly didn't last very well because that's paper. They were, well, they could be written on animal skin. Those would last longer. The scrolls, the Torah was basically animal skin. And then they'd roll them up. No folding, no binding in these books. So the story of Exodus was recounted and everyone taking part in reading from the Haggadah. And the youngest person at the table traditionally asked for 4 questions. And there are 4 cups of wine to go with it. They can substitute grape juice, but most people will have wine. But Mogan David, whatever you got. They're drunk during the Seder, each representing different promises of freedom. And there's also going to be a hidden piece of matzah later eaten as a special dessert. So these are the things that you would do. And they were told Elijah would be coming back. So they'd leave the door open for Elijah. They may even set a place at the table for Elijah as a tradition. Now, was John the Baptist this? He is a type of Elijah. And Elijah is a picture of Jesus. Okay, the traditional songs and melodies, which are often sung in Hebrew and in English, I don't sing, so I'm not going to attempt to do that. And people tend to recline at the table, just kind of. Elbows on the table is okay at this time, symbolizing freedom. Only free people reclined at their meals. If you can imagine the Pharaoh and his court all laying around on the table, so to speak. During Passover, observant of Jews avoid eating, processing any chametz, leavened products. So that's pretty much what goes on during a Seder. I'm not going to, like I said, duplicate it. I might try to find a link to a Jewish-run Seder so you can see it. I may put a link down below, so look for it. It's fun to watch. I love listening to Hebrew. I don't speak enough of it anymore to do any good. I used it a lot when I was doing research, learning the Bible. But now I don't use it, so I've forgotten it. And I end up looking at words only, but not sentences. A lot of times you got to see everything in context. I mean, I know the first sentence in the Bible, because I've got that pretty well memorized. I haven't forgotten that. Bereshit bara Elohim, I can recite that, but the rest of the Bible is pretty much flown away. The bottom line is, it's honoring God by remembering what God did. And for this time of year, that's what they do. It makes them think about God. It's unfortunate that the majority of the Jews who live in Israel today are not practicing. And then you have degrees of practicing. You have Orthodox Jews and you have less Orthodox. Some of this is done just as a fun time to entertain kids. They may have a game time for the kids, get down on the floor and play with tops. This is the time where family would get together. And that's why it's important. There should be the maintenance of a family. What we're doing here in the United States and around the world, where we have all kinds of single parents raising children, that is not the proper way to do it. It's unfortunate, and I'm not condemning anybody who's in that situation, but it is not the ideal situation. No, if you're divorced and your spouse, whichever gender, doesn't matter, is a bad person, God's not saying to get back together. If you can't work that through that person, then you do what you have to do. But God has an ideal for everybody, and He wants everyone to live a harmonious life, peaceful life. The fruits of the Spirit, that's what we're supposed to all be enjoying. So as Passover starts, and Passover starts earlier, diaspora as it's called. If you're outside of Jerusalem, it starts earlier, because the day actually starts on this side, and then it gets over there. There's an 8-hour difference, 7-hour. So it starts here, and it's still the Sabbath over there, but as far as when it starts, the timing. They do a lot of that with the calendars. Some of the events that used to be just one day were extended to 2 or 3 days to make sure that you didn't miss it. There were no telephones. You couldn't get on there and say, "Are you celebrating today?" Can't do that back then. It would take you 3 or 4 days to go visit a relative sometime. And they weren't that far away. It's just that you have to walk. Tradition, you got to understand all the things that we're reading. And if you Fiddler on the Roof, tradition. They do all these things because of tradition. Unfortunately, knowing God isn't always part of it, just the tradition. And the songs they're singing is supposed to be praise songs, songs to God, thanking Him. All this stuff, all this pomp and circumstance and tradition didn't save the Jews. One specific Jew, Jesus, had to die as a sacrifice. Now the cross is a symbol of the death of Christ, the sacrifice that He made. Be careful it's not an idol to you. It is a reminder. But the cross doesn't save. If He never was resurrected, the cross is worthless. Because all the disciples, well, most of them, were crucified. Peter was crucified upside down because he didn't want to be killed the same way his Lord was killed. John is the only one who died of old age. And they let him out of prison just at the very end so he could die outside of prison, but he spent the last few years in prison. This is what the people did who saw Jesus. They were martyred because they saw Jesus. They knew firsthand what Jesus was like. And they were amazed at his power, his compassion, and they were willing to die for it. Do we have people that are willing to die for Jesus? We have a small fraction that are, but the majority of Christians wouldn't. They're not that confident. You know, when Jesus would speak to 5,000, he's got people in the front row, but he's also got people 100 yards away trying to get, well, it may not be 100, maybe 50 yards. He's up on a hill somehow, and they can talk down to him. But it's not an amphitheater, so he's got to speak up. Do you think the people in the back are getting the message as well as the people in the front? You want to be up front. All right, so remember your Jewish friends as they celebrate the Passover. Again, look for a link. I'll put a traditional Seder video up for you. Until we meet in the clouds, God bless.